And getting our workout.
Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Welcome to the Newly podcast, where you get practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. Welcome, everyone. This is a special episode. It is a live Q&A on career growth and accountability with one of my favorites, Mike Phillips. Thanks, Mike, for joining us while you're pumping your iron.
Oh, thanks. I was just filling a little time, but thank you so much for having me.
So good to see you. So first, let's start. We have a couple of good morning chats, and we're so excited to see everyone. But first, let's start a little bit. Mike, can you just talk about what you're doing now, what's going on, how you're building community? Just let us know what's going on.
Sure thing. And yes, Trevor, I was working out. I see him over in the chat. So what is going on right now? So I am building things and working on so many projects at the same time. But the thing I'm most proud of and that I'm most focused on is building a community called The Gym. Mm-hmm. And it's based on the premise that nothing helps you grow stronger than good training partners. And in the creator economy, with solopreneurs or people who are coaches or consultants or side hustlers, we're usually one-person shops, and we're usually doing it all alone and just questioning our life choices and switching hats all day long. And I think there's a lot to be gained from the accountability that we can provide each other like training partners do. When you're having an off day, figuring out why, when you're not pushing yourself the way you could, or simply just knowing somebody else will notice if you don't show up. Mm-hmm. I think that's the psychology that we all benefit from in fitness, and we can do that in business as well. So I'm building a community space for all of us to come together and experience that.
Well, I have to say, I'm also personally a member of the gym community that Mike is building. And yes, I have found so much growth from that community. And I think you're right, Mike. It's that idea that someone's going to notice if you don't show up, and notice if you don't complete XYZ that you said you were going to do. Or, someone's going to be there to encourage you if you don't complete XYZ like you said you're going to do, and kind of ask you those hard questions. And I think all of that's really, really wonderful. I just wanted to also call a shout out to our lovely, lovely Nadine. Nadine is our comment fairy. She is amazing. And Nadine is going to be helping us out today with this live Q&A in this manner. So if anybody has essentially a question about accountability, career growth, something that they want to know about how to move forward with their life or just career in general, you can put it in the chat. Our lovely Nadine Comment Fairy will pick it up from the chat, and then she will send you, if you would like to come up on stage and join us via video and ask the question live, she'll send you a restream link, which you can use to log into our live studio. We'll bring you up on screen, and then we'll just chat a little bit. So let's get this going a little bit. I also wanted to say just one more thing about this topic. So accountability in and of itself can be kind of an icky word. Some people don't like that word. It feels a little heavy. And really, accountability is just somebody holding you to account. And when you account for something, you just note that it is there or it is not there. And I think it's really important that we start to look at this word as a really agnostic word, in that it's just accounting for what is happening. And if it's happening in the right way or the wrong way, it doesn't really matter, but just holding yourself to account. And it can be a really, we talk about self-love, self-growth. It can be a really loving thing to hold yourself accountable because, how else would you accomplish what it is that you want to do or where you want to go? Any comments on that, Mike? I feel like you might have an opinion on that, and I'd love to hear it.
I do. And I really love your usage of the word agnostic there, because it's truly independent. And I feel accountability is often closely entwined with our opinions of failure. I think that's where a lot of people get sensitive about it. And because failure becomes almost a moral judgment. Like people say you are a failure, as if it's not just a fact of whether something worked or didn't. It's now an assessment of you. And to say, hey, I have failed at something is, in my view, it's just like working out. It's another rep. It's another repetition. Nobody says, oh, you did one rep. Why are you not getting in shape? They say, oh, you're just going to do 2. You're just going to do 3. You're going to do 15. You're going to do whatever it takes for you to achieve your goal is the expectation. And yet in business and professional life, we all of a sudden look at it as, I didn't achieve the thing I set out to do. I am now somehow morally inferior because I failed to achieve that.
Yeah.
And that's where the accountability gets difficult, I think, for people, because the word to be held account for something is not necessarily intrinsically positive or negative. It's just an objective fact.
Yeah.
And yet when we are held accountable, when we miss a goal, then that's when it gets twisted up, or the potential to miss a goal. Now we're like, well, I don't want to be held accountable because I don't want to be seen as a failure. That's where I think a lot of that comes from.
I agree. And to piggyback off that just one more time, I think, you know, if something doesn't work and you're held to account for, and you realize that, you know, it didn't work for XYZ reason, you're really just collecting data. It's not that you yourself personally failed. Maybe part of your process is just it doesn't work well, and you need to refine that. And that's all data. It's all data that helps you refine how you want to move forward. And the other thing I like about the gym, and also the analogy of that weightlifting, is that oftentimes to get stronger, you have to lift until failure, until your muscle is like about to freaking give out, and you're like shaking.
You're at that limit. Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
Yeah, you have to. So say more about that. I don't know more about I don't know the physiology of that, but I think that's also really important to note as well.
Sure. And honestly, you don't have to be an expert, like Olympic athlete, to understand the concept of fitness. I think just wellness and body function is something like we all are intimately aware of, being humans. And when it comes to that concept of training to failure, there is a fascinating process that happens to drive you to growth. And I bet Kevin Green, who's seen him in the chat's popping in, because he's one of my LinkedIn weightlifting buddies. He's a lifter too.
Love it.
But the last rep before failure in any exercise produces more growth stimulus than any other rep in the set that you do. So in a weird way, let's say you're doing 10 curls like I was doing in the intro of the call. The first 9 are essentially pre-fatigue preparation for that last rep that matters the most. And ironically, we think about people who are like posting on LinkedIn to build an audience, or people who are creating a podcast show. And people post on LinkedIn for a few months and stop. They post 7 episodes of a podcast and stop. And it's that old chart that's a long tail before the curve ticks up, and they quit right before it ticks up. That's the same thing that happens if you skip the last rep.
Oh.
You're literally missing all of the growth stimulus right at the end, because the workout, like the failures are not actually what triggers growth. It triggers growth, but it's not what builds the growth in a muscle or business. It's it provokes the growth response. And so you need to come to that point of having sufficient challenge to get there. And so that's where accountability and fitness and business come into play, because you can now push yourself to that limit, embrace failure as a step in the process, and then experience the rewards of that stimulus.
Right. I think this is so important, because oftentimes people will give up before that last rep. And for me, so I'm in a grad program right now, an MBA grad program, and we always joke with each other that it's a really rigorous program. But we always joke with each other, us and me and my cohort, that like everybody at least once a semester is like, I'm giving up. This is ridiculous. I'm done. I'm a failure. I'm going to quit. And what's the funniest thing I've noticed is every time I get to that point in the semester, I usually have my biggest and most impressive insights and my biggest leaps forward right after I have that total mental breakdown.
It's so true. And there's so many parallels to that in education or any goal we must strive for. And it's funny because that comes into the whole concept of like what is a failure? How do you embrace it? And do you see it as an opportunity, as like proof of progress, of having embraced that challenge or embraced the suck, as the phrase goes? Like, this sucks, I'm embracing the suck. I'm just owning it. And then sometimes there are failures, like, for example, like you're working out and there's potential injury. Like, I'm not old, but I'm also not young enough to have no injury from having worked out.
Right.
But at the same time, like, sometimes that happens, and then you're like, oh, what do I choose to do in response to this? What kind of pivot, what kind of new direction do I need to take, or new learning? from this, can I now apply to a new application? Sometimes that's changing the form that you take. Sometimes that's changing the application of your effort. But the experience is something you never lose. There's no, you never start over. You only ever start again with the same experience, with more experience.
Yes. You only ever start with more experience. I love that. We have so much activity in the chat. I'm so excited about it. But Trevor has some really good points. I wonder if it would be time to bring him up right now. I'd really like to. He just asked an interesting question about when accountability might help us. So it looks like Nadine is bringing Trevor up to the stage. We're so excited to have you. Oh, someone said that they're going to work out on their TRX differently now, which I love. That's amazing.
Oh, there you go.
That's so great.
Multiple benefits from this show. We got professional pivots and career and business growth and fitness advice all in one show. Look at this.
We love this. Okay, we're bringing Trevor up to the stage. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for engaging the chat. I love your questions.
Hey, I wouldn't miss you guys, for anything. I was waking up all night long. Is it time? It's
2:30. It's 3:30 a.m.
That's it. It's excited to be here. So
good.
All right. So my question is, when does it work against us? Right? Like when do we take it so seriously that it's to our detriment?
Yeah. Do you have anything specific kind of context you're thinking of that in, or just in general?
Well, more in general, I think, because just based on where this conversation has kind of gone and some of the analogies, metaphors, and stuff that you like, and Britta with your experience in the MBA program, and and mine as a just a salty old seller has been selling stuff for way too long. And I mean, frankly, my experience is like I've survived by being accountable to my customers' outcomes.
Right.
And this has been a truth since day one, when I learned that George Merck said, hey, it's all about you put the needs of the customer first, the patient, right? In that case, because pharmaceuticals, and the money will follow. Okay. Well, it doesn't always follow.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes sellers have got to sell, and sometimes you find yourself in situations where you're selling something that Yellow Pages, for example.
Well, Trevor, I think this is such an important question, and to me, this speaks to surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. I think accountability can work against us when we're not surrounded with the kind of people that are going to deliver what it is that we want. And we need to be clear with ourselves what it is that we want. So, if you have a gym buddy that is like all about, building their lats, or let's say you have a business accountability buddy that's all about, creating YouTube videos, and that's not what you're trying to do, you might be getting accountability in a way that is not going to be helpful for you. That for me, that really speaks to like, be careful, and not in like let me be like overly paranoid, but be selective about the people that you choose to let into that circle. And, good thing about like a community, for instance, like the gym, is people are only there if they're really motivated to be there. And so it's kind of like similar to like working out in an actual gym, meaning like you're there, you're seeing other people do things. It kind of motivates you to also start to do whatever it is that you're there to do. But what are you getting from what I'm saying, Trevor? I feel like you might have some thoughts on this.
Well, I was just my brain just sort of went off, and because I was thinking about the gym, and I was thinking about my experience in the gym, right? So we're there, we know each other, obviously, and the accountability to the meeting, right, is a thing, right? So I am expected or am part of that, right, experience, participate in it. So that is
it's a time component.
It's a time component, yeah, and that accountability is actually, it gets bigger because if it's a one-on-one, right, which I'm notoriously bad, okay, at one-on-ones, just terrible.
Yeah.
I got to schedule thing now again. It's just forget. This is this now. Okay, let's move it out. Anyway, they don't carry the same level, right?
Yeah.
Of accountability. So I think in this case, it's like, okay, no, that's
The
getting me
session.
right. But I like your point, Britta, where we need to sort of being surrounded by those people, by and basically what I'm hearing is, well, guess what? If accountability is not working out for you, go find something else.
I would add a little nuance. What I would do to help this out is, like, I think it comes down to who you're accountable to, and what you're accountable for.
Oh yeah.
So what I would say here is, to Britta's point, yes, you want to be accountable to the right people. I'm in dad mode in my life right now, but when I was not in dad mode, I used to compete in weightlifting, and I had different professional coaches over the course of my athletic chapter of my life. And having the right coach, the right trainer, the right atmosphere of the facility, it matters, right? So, like, for example, like, I was a power lifter, which meant, certain, bench press, squat, and deadlift, and I was competing in those lifts. But I had at one point was part of a gym that was more like football functional training for sport application, not for weightlifting application. And while any exercise does produce positive response for the body, the vibe was off. Like, they weren't focused on the types of things that I wanted to be focused on. And not that I knew better than the coach, but the accountability wasn't as effective. Yeah, I had scheduled appointments to be there. Yeah, there were people who would notice if I was gone. But who I was accountable to, you need to have goal alignment. So, like, there needs to be a tribal identity, whether it's a one-to-one with you and some same journey that you're on, or a group of people who are in a similar journey that you're on. I think that's part of it, right? So this belonging, if I were to give it a word, the tribal identity and belonging are important. That's like who you're available to, accountable to. What is also important, right? So we talk about, like, where it can work against us. You're accountable to customers. That's really good for the company who buys, the customer's buying from, right? But one of the things to consider is you've externalized the relationship of who you're accountable to there. And I think the possible double-edged sword, depending on how well you wield it, is, if you're accountable to someone else whose benefits tie back to you, like, only financially, if they purchase, you wind up in a little bit of a beholden relationship versus accountable. Yeah. And so, for example, I've worked in sales before I was a marketer. So, like, Trevor, you and I have that in common. You just carried on to the point of saltiness more than I did. And, the thing that I remember is, like, accountable to customers is one thing, and you close deals and you do well. But then the other thing is, I'm accountable to my family, to the dependencies that I have on me. And so that's a different type of accountability and motivation of, the family doesn't care per se which product you sold or who benefited from a certain product outcome or feature. Like, they're like, did you meet a quota that the family quota for the commission, right? There's a job quota, and then there's, like, the unspoken family quota of, even if you missed that big quota for the job, there's this much as our survivability number, right? Right. So there's who you're accountable to as far as community and belonging and tribal identity is one thing, but also, like, what specific goal are you setting for? The same outcomes can be driven by different goals.
Yeah. Such a great point, Mike. Such a great point. So we're going to round that out. And Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. It looks like we have another really interesting question.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to jump off and make space. All right.
All right. Thanks, Trevor.
So much. Thanks.
So we have.
Is there an animation? I just pushed him off the screen.
Wouldn't that be so great?
Okay, yeah.
We have a question from Virginia James in the chat. About millennials and how to keep going. I believe that we're going to bring her up to the stage, but in the meantime, Kevin Green says, you mentioned your coaches. How did you go about picking coaches? I think that's a great question to answer in the interim while we're waiting for Virginia.
For sure. Yeah, Kevin, thanks for that one. Honestly, coach selection is intensely personal, right? So you can select people based on the big picture stuff, experience, credentials, and those are important. You want to filter from that for sure, but you're still going to have a pool of options for people. And I think a lot of times when I worked with people or not, there is an importance in sampling.
Yeah.
So I used to you don't go like coach shopping, but like you go around and you set up a trial membership at a gym, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
or you get in there and you're like, does it vibe? Is the style of delivery what I'm looking for? And just not that you're looking for the results yet. Results come with consistency, not that intense trial period.
Right.
But I think it's enough for you to know whether you're willing to invest in the process to produce the long-term results. So that's generally the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I would say so I'm in a coaching journey myself now. So I am a coach, and am coaching people on careers and life and things like that. And from a coach's standpoint, when I look for people, I look for, is their goal coachable? So the opposite end, what is your goal? And be clear about your goal so that you know and can tell your coach. I look for, are they open to being coached? So is there a level of self-awareness there? So be honest with yourself about the level of self-awareness and the willingness you are to engage fully. Maybe you only want to do cardio, or maybe you only want to do XYZ thing. You know, don't just be honest with yourself about that. And then I think the third thing is, how much time is X person willing to commit to it, which is what another thing on the coach's end. And so again, it's like, same on each side. Like being clear about those things helps you find the right kind of person. It
reminds me of the old the original Karate Kid movie, where they make a deal, like the student promises to learn, the teacher promises to teach. You have to meet each other, and that's what I fish for in that trial period, for sure. It's also kind of why I built, like when I built the gym for creators, that it involves this trial period in the beginning, because you need to see if you vibe with this to know if it works.
Vibing is a thing. It looks like Virginia is here. I'm going to bring her up on stage. Hi, Virginia. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I would love for you to ask your question live so everybody can see it if they can't see the chat. So
gotta find it. I found out that there was a second window feedback. So let's see. So my question, it's a little long and there's two parts to it.
Okay.
So basically specific to millennial women, as I am one, I work with them. So how do we keep going when feeling deflated with economic twists and turns, job hunting? We all just got to see our LinkedIn feed, right? With layoffs and whatnot, and kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop. So accountability buddies help, of course, but how do we stay accountable to ourselves? So that's the two-part question for you. You can sit with it for a second.
I love this. I love this question, Virginia. Thank you for bringing it, because if there's one topic that I think is relevant for our age cohort, as we're now entering, like, not early career stage, like early and mid-career stages now, is just there's a bell curve of luck. So I've described this before, right? So of all the luck, that's all the things we can do for agents, that's agency that we control. Our locus of control is inside of ourselves, right? Like, do I choose to show up at the gym? Do I choose to prepare the interview? Do I choose to do good work for my employer? Whatever those things are. But then there's like this bell curve of distribution of life events. And there's most people in the middle of the bell curve, like if the y-axis is the number of people and this is luck, most people in the middle experience a mix. There's like a mixed bag. You got some good, you got some bad. It's like you got to take the good with the bad. That's where all the cliches come from. Yeah. There's some people who somehow defy what seems like fair distribution and wind up getting all good luck. Like they just, for a chapter of their life or for a longer period of time, they're like, ooh, like they don't get struck by lightning in a lightning storm. Like all the things that, like, they sold their house just in time for the market to move, like all those things, right? And then for every one of those people, there's the other side of that bell curve where you get not a lot of good luck. And it's not like a moral assessment. It's just there's even just agnostic statistics. There is a distribution of that. And so there's two kind of truths you have to hold simultaneously, even though, like, this duality, right? One is you need to understand there are things on this bell curve that we do not directly control in career and business and life in general, that happen to us, that are naturally external levers, that are not, like, economy is a huge one, right? We can make personal finance decisions. We can't control the entire stock market by ourselves.
I wish we could. Gosh dang it.
That'd be handy, right? So that's one. And then at the same time as accepting that there are things outside of the locus of control that you have, you have to have this almost, I'm going to call it reckless optimism, that you must act as if you could.
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty with holding those two is they are at odds. There is a duality of it, right? But when you have this this optimism of persistence, what happens is you start seeing failures don't set you back. You wind up seeing a failure as another rep in the gym. It's another repetition, another exercise that you're just going through. You're like, okay, that didn't work. The next thing, you know, like Frozen 2, you do the next right thing, right? I don't know if everybody Disney. I have a child, so Disney is like I'm the brain right now. So like, yes,
we can tell you're a dad of a daughter, and
yes,
I love
I'm
that.
a girl dad. So yes, you do the next right thing. Right?
Yeah.
And so, and then how do you mentally hold your edge through all of it, right? It comes down to there's a way of embracing the discomfort. I think if you look at like who was the gentleman that wrote the book? Ryan Holiday wrote the book about stoicism. So the idea is it's not about ignoring the emotional impact. It's not about becoming not burying your issues and creating psychological issues for yourself. It's about, for example, like I was just joking around at the beginning of the workout. I was like doing a workout in the beginning while we're doing the countdown here. When you do those, because again, I didn't know how long the countdown was, I'm starting to feel the lactic acid build up, and I'm starting to feel like the beginning start to happen, right? I'm like, how many repetitions did Britta say I was going to have to do here? So you start, but what I've noticed is like from working out, you feel the burn come, and it grows over time, and you almost build a relationship with it because it's a measure of your effort. It's a measure of perseverance, of progress, and when you start seeing it like that, all of a sudden it's not something to be avoided or drowned out, or it creates a biochemical difference in your brain where you don't sense it as pain to be avoided. You sense it as reward in the weirdest way. And I don't mean that I don't mean to become like self-masochistic of like, I'm going to go have financial luck and I'm going to love this and it's going to be fine. Right. But it's almost like, okay, that sales deal I was trying to close didn't close. If you ask anybody who sales, Trevor, who's just on the stage, you're going to get a whole lot more no's than you get yeses in life, in sales and in life in general. But it's the second best answer you can get. And I think in a way there needs to be a practice, mental training to experience these things that we normally label as setbacks or failures and start just feeling that sensation as objective data and even sign of progress, so you can assign a mental positive edge to it.
Yeah, and I would even interject. Yeah, I would even interject, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, Virginia, because I know you do a lot of coaching around this, and I know that you would have a great perspective as well. But I think it's also too, I mean, Mike, you're talking about changing your relationship to the idea of struggle, and for me, a lot of that, for my personal experience, a lot of that has been changing my relationship to the language I'm using around struggle. So instead of, using words like failure or, other things like that, I will say like, well, that didn't work out. Okay. And then instead of asking, why me, really like getting serious about asking myself, why not me? Like, why not? When I started this podcast, I was just like, I could never do that. Like, I didn't think I could do this. And then I just kept thinking, well, why not? Why not? Why not?
You have 5 times more episodes than the average podcast now. Like, like you're doing great. And this is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I love the idea of language. And that's Virginia. I would totally take that in addition to the mental, like quiet introspection part that I shared. Like, and now you say it, my workout journal is like over here on the table right now. So like in there, when I reach my limit for working out, I write failure achieved.
Oh, I like
and
it.
I'm very specific. I don't say failed. I didn't say to failure. I said failure achieved in my journal.
Well, Virginia, I know you have your feminine sage wisdom coaching, and I've benefited from a lot of your wisdom. So what wisdom do you bring to this question? I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, the thing, well, first of all, I will also do my TRX workout differently today. Thank you, Mike. That was my comment. I was like, all right, so when I fall on the floor, that's a good thing. I just wanted to say that before I got off stage. But to answer your question, Britta, with FSW and the work that I do specifically, I call it a zone, right? And one thing I've learned over the years, it's so much better to think, feel, embody a life that says, oh, it doesn't have to be A, B, C, D, E, all linear. It's a zone. Life is a zone, really. If whether you play football or soccer or nothing, it doesn't really matter. And so, like, really living in this big picture space. So instead of spiraling in the emotions, or like I've done academic, social work, nonprofit stuff, right? You're instead of spiraling, how about we just kind of be in the feelings, acknowledge them. You're right, Mike. So we don't get stuck in shit. I don't know if I can swear. Sorry.
That's all right.
But like we don't get stuck in it.
We'll
And then
edit it in post.
come
It's
out.
not like we're live. It's fine.
Yeah, that's that just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But you know, so I think it's like big picture thinking.
Yeah.
Like sit with it, be in the feelings, don't ignore it, and like acknowledge it. But then coming out of it and saying that's just part of the zone. That's just part of the plan. That's just part of the trail system of hiking, where you're like you wanted the destination, but you're freaking lost somewhere, and you're like, well, I guess this is literally my reality right now. So that's my perspective. That's how I've been living life the last few years. And it's been incredibly helpful to help women do the same. But yeah, I love the reps example too. It's just like, it's part of the process. You know, let's continue forward and feel the burn, which can be looked at and reframed in a lot of different ways.
Right.
So,
Right.
yes.
So you're lost on a trail. Lost, achieved. Woohoo.
Lost, yes.
Found the wrong way.
Lost. Yes. Yeah. But it's fucking, sorry. It's beautiful and I'm okay with it. You know, and it's not, and that's a privileged thing to say too. Like it's not always bunny rabbits and roses, but it shows us the beauty after we've been through the valleys too. So anyway, that was my 2 cents, Britta.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I really appreciate it. It looks like Kevin is ready to come up to the stage. Cool. Thank you, Virginia. All right, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I was so intrigued by your question. I'd love if you answer or asked it live again so everybody can hear you. So thanks for joining.
Appreciate you having me up here. So I guess.
Could you come a little bit closer to the screen? It's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're sounding a little far away.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hold on.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Gotta love multi-audio devices in our world here. You're like, oh, am I on input F or G? Like,
yeah, right. So it was, I was hearing y'all through my laptop, but for some reason it was set up to, you know,
go figure.
No, but I appreciate y'all having me up here. So I guess my question, and as it was running through my mind, and Mike, as you were talking about having different coaches for squat, deadlift, and bench, right? For me, I transitioned out of the Army about 2.5 years ago and doing a career pivot. And you're kind of alluding to this earlier, but doing a career pivot. So I was transitioning from the Army to the civilian sector and looking for different mentorship and finding mentors. I wasn't really looking for coaches per se, but trying to find the right mentors. And so I guess, how did you select your coaches, and what were you really looking for in that? And, you know, how do you identify what is going to fit best for you and your particular styles? And, or even as you would look for something in a career pivot, if you were to entertain that at that time?
Yeah, I love this question. I'd love to approach it from this direction really quick. Is that, like, someone once told me, never take advice from someone whose life you do not respect and want for yourself. So, like, for instance, you know, you ask your best friend for relationship advice and they have a disaster of relationships behind them. Probably not a great idea to take their advice, right? Like, and even though you might really trust that person with other aspects of your life, getting honest with yourself about the kind of life you really want and the place where you're really aiming. So if you are really, you know, and there's nothing wrong with being motivated by money. If you're really motivated by money and you want to be a millionaire, find a way to get somebody who has that type of life to tell you about how they got there. And I think too, just getting really clear with yourself about motivations is part of the way to find the right kind of people to coach you. What would you say about that, Mike?
Yeah, I like the idea of don't take advice from people who didn't do it right themselves, whatever the topic is, right? So like everybody has an opinion. Not all of them are informed opinions. So that's the first step is that's why I said, like, with like fitness coaching, credentials, like Are you I mean, to like talk about football players, like are you a washed up high school football player who didn't go anywhere and now you're going to tell me you're taking me to the Olympics for something else that you didn't train in? Unless you have other stuff in between that you've built the experience and the credentials with, I'm going to maybe just think twice. So that's one factor. But the way I look at coaching is there's several different types of like, especially mentors. If you get like, let's just back it up to like mentors. There's like 3 different kind of primary roles people can play in like your life for helping you make a pivot or develop new skills or reapply existing skills, right? So you need unconditional support. So usually that comes from spouse, sibling, parent, something like that. Someone who can be the optimist when you're not. You need that person. There's critical support. So you need somebody who's not going to be afraid to not just be devil's advocate to challenge you for just to debate for the sake of debating, but to genuinely say, be the person who's like, this doesn't look quite good enough compared to the thing you said, or this, that rep you just did, I know you have better form. What's on your mind right now? Or like, why are you underloading the bar? Or why did you not apply for this job? Or why are you, why don't you invest in making your resume more readable by a recruiter? Like somebody who can ask the harder questions, that's not going to be the same person who's unconditionally supportive. That best friend is going to say, I'm going to help you get this boyfriend or this girlfriend or whoever, even though they may have a bad track record with relationships, like Britta's example, right?
Yeah.
So 2 different people is what those need to be. And the third one is advisory support. That's where you find someone who I usually aim for at least 2 to 3 years ahead of where you are in whatever the goal is.
Yeah,
that's usually enough to have perspective that can accelerate you to that point. And then they're going to continue growing usually. Sometimes they're static and you catch up to them, or you grow faster because advisory support helps you grow faster. And then you can add another person who's another stepping stone further. So like in the simplest context of like, how do I grow on LinkedIn? You pick a creator who's ahead of you, you engage and learn and you catch up. And then you pick another creator and you go who's got a little bit more following and a little bit more following and a little bit more, and you can climb the ladder. In job pivots and careers, you look at somebody who, if you're freshly out of the armed forces, somebody who's 2 years in to civilian life, right? If you are where you're at, you're about 2-3 years out into civilian, look at somebody who has still been, started their career in the armed forces and is maybe 5 years in. And like, how have they established or are they into an industry and moving up a ladder, or are they building a broad set of skills, more like a T-shaped person? Like you built your skills in the armed forces and now you're broadening your skill set. Look at the sorts of things that these people are doing and find a progression. So progressive overload works in fitness, right? Same thing for careers. Find people to constantly move you to that next weight, if you will.
Well, and Kevin, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, because I'm sure that as we've been talking, you've been thinking about some things, and maybe some things have come up for you. What would you say to all the things that we've said? So
yeah, I mean, very, very similar to what Mike was just saying. I found a lot of the best mentors I had coming out of the Army were two of the ones that really stood out to me. I'm in Syracuse. One was local here in Syracuse, and she was well established in the business field, and she was able to really articulate to me what it was in the civilian sector, what talent acquisition leaders were looking for, how my resume looked from a civilian's eyes. She had never served. She was never part of the military community, and she gave me that outsider perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had someone who he had been a recruiter in the Army, just like I was, and then he was a recruiter in the civilian sector. So he had walked the path that I walked, talking about that 2 to 3 years, right? He had walked the path, and then he walked the path that I was trying to walk. And so, giving him my resume, he said, hey, I understand exactly what you're saying, but here's where it's not translating. Here's where you're not delivering the message correctly. And not many people could truly understand that, except for someone who had walked that path before.
Right.
And he was able to articulate that for me in a way I was able to understand. So he really hammered it all home. And once he had reinforced all that, that's when I really started to see success in my career pivot.
Wow. Yeah. I love such a practical example. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I loved your question. And Mike, let's keep talking about this, but we're gonna maybe have somebody else come up to the stage. Thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate you, Kevin.
Yeah, so just I wanted to touch on, so there was a couple topics we wanted to touch on in terms of like how we want to, learn through accountability. But I was wondering if Melissa would want to come up to the stage. Melissa, if you can hear us, I'd love for you to connect with Nadine so that you can come and ask a question about accountability and reflect on it with us. I'd love that. But beyond that, one thing I know that we haven't touched on yet, Mike, is how accountability can help with collaboration and referrals.
Yes.
And I think that is I think it's a great topic to touch on. So I'd love to give you the floor and hear how you think that can help.
Sure thing. Yeah, we have kind of talked a bit about like where it comes from, like motivation and personal progress. We've talked a little bit about, new learnings, new skill buildings, and growth professionally. But yeah, so there's a powerful thing in partnership. So there's accountability when you set a personal independent goal, and then you have people who are aware of an independent goal. But then when it comes to mutual accomplishment, when you have somebody like us deciding to do a show together, and this is beneficial to both of us here, there's an additional level or additional flavor of accountability that comes into play in creating this sort of outcome, right? And it's the same difference between, I guess, promising to show up to a study group. I'm going to think academically, right? So you're in an MBA, like we're going to show up and we're going to sit in the library, we're going to study our stuff, and we're going to go and do our independent tests and get individual scores and individually graduate. And like, that's the plan. That's more of the motivation side of things. When it comes to collaboration, it's more like the group project where we're coming to add ingredients together for a collective outcome. And I think that's a deeper level of kind of accountability, because that's usually where, the old adage where like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's what I'm thinking. There is a synergy that can happen when two people are working on a collective outcome. It's greater than what I could do plus what you could do, because what we can do has more substance to it. And I think this is one of the things inside the gym that I'm excited to have fostered there. And it's the sort of thing that kind of mirrors a little bit of what Kevin said too, when it comes to like working together on collaborative things. So collaborating could be for content projects. It could be for like this, like a show. It could be on a business venture, like me and a good friend of mine, Lisa, are working on a project together to bring LinkedIn analytics reports to creators. Or it could be even just you're looking for coaching clients and I can help refer coaching clients to you.
Right, yeah.
And I think there is a level of empowerment that comes from that, because we start dealing in a deeper level of trust.
Yes.
So when it comes to trust, it's a currency in that you can spend it to you can ask someone to do something. So you're kind of expending trust, right? You can squander it or waste it, where I can have you do something and I say, trust me, do this, and it doesn't work out. And then you're like, I don't know if Mike's got great advice on that anymore.
Yeah.
And then, you earn it also. Like, because all the language we have around trust is financial. It's actually very interesting. So you earn it, you spend it, you waste it, you squander it. And when you're looking for collaborative efforts or referrals, you wind up having this trust currency exchange that takes place. And you can build greater amounts of trust. And then the fun thing that happens is, if I were to refer a client to you, for example, for coaching, that client's going to trust you as a baseline as much as they trust me.
Yes.
Up to about as much, but they will trust you intrinsically more than if you cold reached them and just had them start. So that transferability, again, that's a financial language, transferring funds, transferring trust. I can transfer trust from me to you through a client referral. And so I think when you're held accountable, then if I refer you someone and they don't have a good experience, that trust I've transferred, I've lost. So you have an accountability to me, the referee, the referrer, they're the referee. Right. And then conversely, if I if I refer them to you, they have a positive experience, my trust is enhanced. And, or if I refer that to you and then you have a bad experience with the client, you're like, Mike, stop sending me people. This is not
right. Stop sending me these cranky people. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. So like that's a level of accountability to trust more than just the goal. And that's where I think the unique thing, it comes into play, because with that trust, we can grow actual money revenue through coaching or business referrals or attention that becomes clients from content collaborations too.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we have our friend Melissa who's coming up just to offer some wisdom and say hi. Hopefully she's coming up to the stage soon. I do have to wrap soon. Not actually wrap, but like, that would be
an interesting outro if you wanted to, but
that would be an interesting outro. B2B business wrap. Maybe I have a whole nother career in front of me. Who knows?
Oh, you should get Alex Sheridan on then. There you go.
Oh my God. Yes. That would be so great. That would be so
duet.
Great. Well, yeah. So I'm not seeing Melissa here yet.
Yeah, I know we're trying to get her up on stage.
Yeah.
Also, I appreciate the warning so that, I feel like Britta's like, hey, Mike, I want you to be on the show. We're going to talk about pivots and failures. And I'm like, so did you have a thought process where you're like, who's a really good failure? I'm going to ask Mike.
No.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, it looks like Melissa's right here.
Awesome. There we are.
So good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I appreciate you.
I'm sorry about the glow. I wasn't prepared and it's just coming. But listen, I had a question. We're all pretty good at keeping ourselves accountable overall, but what do you guys do when it stops working for yourself?
Ooh, great question.
Yep. So
yeah,
you need what I do. So like, for example, like there's things, try to keep it brief, but the most important thing is understanding, I think, the psychology of how progress and habits are formed. Yeah. Right. So I think for me, I try to remind people this is that motivation comes from progress, not the other way around. You don't usually get or find motivation like it's hiding behind a tree somewhere and you just got to like go find it. Right. And then all of a sudden you can make progress once you go get this external thing. Motivation is a byproduct of making meaningful, even if they are microscopic steps forward. Even if you don't know where all the steps will combine to as an ending point, movement is where that motivation comes from. And so when you lose it, which it's a when, not an if, we do fall off the trail. So like, I'm renovating my home gym. I haven't worked out in a couple of weeks. I know I'm going to have to rebuild some habits here, right? So how do we do this, right? And it starts with setting goals so small, right? Taking like, I want to get in best shape of my life. Huge goal right now. You break it all the way down to like, I want to do a workout. It's still kind of big. I'm gonna wake up early enough to do a workout. Okay, that's something. I'm just going to be awake and not be asleep 3 minutes later. You do that.
Yeah.
For myself, I woke up, I moved myself to the gym, and I would fall asleep on my yoga mat. I did this when I was first starting my fitness journey again after a long break. That was a success. And then the next day, I'm like, I can wake up. I don't know if I can do the whole thing yet, but I can at least wake up for the gym. And then I did it again. And now the small goals give you a sense of cadence, of rhythm, right? So when you have slide a repetition, even 2 repetitions, you start feeling this beat and a rhythm. And a cadence is easy for you to feel and find a groove, like listening to music, right? So you hear like, okay, I'm gonna do a small step, and then I can kind of feel the groove going. Now that groove almost has self-sustaining energy, right? And that's the momentum that you start to feel. Then you can start compounding that and making a little bit bigger of a step. Because if you
Let me ask you this though, Mike.
Yeah.
What happens? Do you have a fail safe? What happens?
You're asking,
like,
do
you
I have a
have
fail-safe?
somebody who comes to get you 10 minutes after you're supposed to like be awake in bed, just laying there? Do you have somebody who's going to poke you to make sure you're not snoring?
I don't personally.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I like that, Melissa.
It can be effective to have a person or construct like I have a vibration alarm clock that I wear on my wrist. I have a watch that vibrates, and that allows me to wake up independent of bothering anybody else who might not want to be awake. Yeah. So that's a functional thing that I use. But or phone alarms can do that. Those alarm clocks that drive away from you that you have to chase, like you can, there's all sorts of things you can utilize.
Yeah.
Listen, I love myself too much to make me have to run at 4 a.m. Okay, that's just a fact. But I do have friends that might text me, or I do have friends that call me by a certain time to go, hey, Lauren Sermon, for example, guys, this is something I use myself, which is why I asked, but she will tell me, no, you are applying for jobs today, whether I was or wasn't going to. She was giving me this, no, you will. And so I like a fail safe. I didn't know if you guys had them.
And that's
I love
that.
I love the concept of
it's an application of accountability, right? Where you can have yourself now be accountable to these friends, and they're, by showing up in this phone call or whatever, or poking you, whatever it is, are holding you accountable, right?
Yeah.
So
and I think the last thing too, Mike, you also talked about how just understanding how your brain works in terms of motivation. But I think understanding that to build momentum also, you need to give your brain that dopamine hit. You need to give your brain that exciting celebrational moment. And so whether that's I don't know, you go and lay on your yoga mat and you listen to your favorite song. And so you have to find a small way with every time you take that little itty bitty bit of momentum forward, you find a way to celebrate it. So Melissa, after that person calls you and says, no, you will apply for jobs, think of a way that you can add a dopamine hit to that. And I'm not saying do heroin while you apply for jobs. Don't do that. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, no, we don't condone that. We do not. Yes.
Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? You could eat candy, eat your favorite candy while you apply for as many
You're
jobs.
reading my brain. I'm a big fan of the sour gummies. It's a thing. Or, I'm a big fan of bagels. It's bread, carbs, empty calories every morning. I'm just smiling at it going, yes, we're going to get going. And when those carbs hit, man, I'm off. But
any construct you can create that creates a small reward, it allows you to stack those small wins.
Totally.
You guys do the checklist in the morning. My favorite part of the checklist is wake up. If I don't wake up, I don't have to check the box. I'm good. My to-do list is done. But if I do check the box, that dopamine hits. They don't care.
There you go. It's a small accomplishment.
Brush your teeth, eat your bagel, get to the office. All of those things, you can just check them off and get going. But have a fail safe.
I like it. I like the fail safe. Well, everyone, I know there's, we sort of have, speaking of momentum, I'm going to take you off stage. Thank you, Melissa, for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. So we are going to have to wrap up here, but I just want to call out, we had Nathan Hill, who had a great question that was going to maybe come up to the chat. And then also Sharon Perry had a really wonderful question about digital presence and career outcomes. Mike, I think this just means we're going to have to do another one of these. What the heck?
We might have to. There's too much to fit into an hour, which is a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this special live episode, this live Q&A. Mike, why don't you tell them how they can find out more about the gym, and then we can wrap the show.
Sure thing. Yes. So if you guys are looking for a tribe of training partners to help you become a stronger creator, whether you're building a personal brand for career, or you've got a side hustle, or you've got a main hustle that you want to grow, the gym is a place for folks like us who want to just get better at this creator economy life that we're trying to build for ourselves. You can learn more about that through the featured link in my LinkedIn profile, or you can go to marketingmuscle.online. That is my website, and there's a lot of basic information there to learn about the gym. You can get in touch with Britta or me directly. As members, we can get you set up for a trial to see if this community vibes for you. Yes. And I am starting career coaching, so I would love to coach you in your career if you so desire that. And join us again live next week. We'll have our normal, regularly scheduled half-hour show with my friend Jim, Dr. Jim, awesome guy. But join us next week live at 8:30 a.m. on the Newly podcast, where you get more practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.